How about this time? Could this time be the final blow for Theresa May? When British subjects go to the polls Thursday in European elections which they never thought they'd have to vote in, they're likely to turn on both the Conservatives and the opposition Labour Party. Her attempt at a last hurrah, fourth time round with an amended divorce deal before Parliament has triggered yet another backbench revolt. Will this one prove fatal? Then what happens? One certainty? Well, that Nigel Farage will be returning to Brussels. Brexit's biggest cheerleader has a new party that's slated to top Thursday's poll. Will he be serving for just a few months? Or will it all go on? How much momentum for insurgents, be they in the UK or on the continent, where far-right populists staged a show of force last Saturday in Milan, only to see one of their historic standard bearers, Austria's Freedom Party, booted out of power over a Russia-loving sting operation. So how much outside influence in these EU elections? How much stomach is there really for undoing the European project? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the high stakes of the EU elections, both in the UK and on the continent. And with us from the UK capital, she's a London City councillor representing Camden. Louisa Porritt is a candidate for the Liberal Democrats in the European elections. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Adrian Rod is a senior lecturer in British and Commonwealth Studies at the French Political Science Institute Sciences Po, their Saint-Germain-en-Laye campus. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
A commentator and novelist Tom Connan is with us, or Tom Connan, I should say.
Connan,
great. Pronounce it right, okay. Co-author of the philosophical essay, Manual of a Resurrection.
That's right.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
The France 24 debate, where you can weigh in on the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. This week, it's European elections. Oh, and next week, it's what some are billing as Theresa May's last hurrah, a fourth attempt to pass her divorce deal through Parliament. We'll see if she makes it to next week, because there's a lot of activity this Thursday around Downing Street, some suggesting she may not last the weekend. She's revised that deal and said before MPs earlier, before you dismiss my latest proposal, reminding them time is not on their side either. Louisa Porritt, we've written off Theresa May before. Are we going to get to that vote? And will she still be the Prime Minister?
Well, it's an open question, and it just goes to show that this is a government that's in crisis. I mean, this will be the fourth time that she's bringing back this deal to Parliament, a deal that has been roundly rejected a number of times before. And it just goes to show that she's making a bit of a desperate last-ditch attempt, because we've got the European elections tomorrow, to try and perhaps shore up the Conservative vote. But actually, both the people, I believe, and Parliament are fed up with this mess, which is why we need to send a strong message in the elections tomorrow. She
sent out a big sweetener, though, in her proposals that came out on Tuesday, which was that if the deal passes through Parliament, it will be subject to a second referendum. Are you not in favor of that?
So I think this is a really important distinction to make, actually. She has not promised to attach a confirmatory vote to this deal. She is proposing to bring the deal back to Parliament again, and then is saying there might be a free vote on a referendum. But we've had that in Parliament before. It's not a referendum attached to the deal itself, and that's what the Liberal Democrats are campaigning for. We say that the deal should be put back to the people for them to decide, because clearly we do have a deadlock in Parliament. This has been going on for months now with no progress, and that the people should then be able to decide whether her deal is what they want, or if we can remain in the European Union, which is what the Liberal Democrats want.
Isn't this your best pathway to getting that second referendum, to breaking that deadlock?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's a complete last-ditch attempt, because the elections are tomorrow, to promise to promise something that we don't know the government is going to deliver upon, we don't know that we can trust that Theresa May will actually then put the deal to a referendum. So we say that absolutely we would agree to something whereby a referendum was attached to it, but that is not what's being presented to Parliament.
All right, the leader of the opposition made it pretty clear. Whatever a lame duck prime minister proposes cannot fly. That's a pretty clear message there, Adrian. Whatever you propose, I'm going to be against it. What do you think of that?
Well, he does have a point when he says there's going to be a change.
Does he really?
To some extent, when he says there's going to be a change of Conservative Prime Minister and the next leader is unlikely to favour Theresa May's legacy. However, there is, of course, a political aspect to this as well. I would imagine that Jeremy Corbyn is feeling quite relieved that he's not going to have to be in a position to support a deal, a Brexit deal. He's not going to be the one who's going to be blamed by a large number of supporters or members of his party for having been the one who enabled Brexit.
And he's also isn't the one with the attention, because those polls are terrible for the Conservatives, but they're only just marginally better for Labour.
Yes, indeed. And what's been blamed mainly for that is the idea that the Labour Party has, tried to have its cake and eat it, tried to sit on the fence, as many people have said. And for many traditional Labour supporters who don't want Brexit, the Liberal Democrats or the Green Party or Change UK have the advantage of presenting a very clear message of opposition to Brexit, whereas I think some British voters feel that if they vote Labour, they're not entirely sure what it is they'd be voting for.
All right, Tom Connan, we're going to show, I'll tell you what, we're going to show the last YouGov poll before the EU elections, which came out late on Tuesday. And I'll ask you, what do we pay attention to when we look at this graph? Is it the 37% for the Brexit party of Nigel Farage? Is it the 47% when you add up all the leavers, if you think that all the Tories are for leave, which isn't necessarily the case? But is it the 48% for Remain, if you include all of Labour? There too, you have to wonder. Or again, is it the poor numbers for the two mainstream parties? What catches your eye when you look at those numbers?
I think the same thing is happening in France right now, because people are really in favor of the Front National, that's called Rassemblement National, and the other parties, the Socialist Party and the Republicans Party, the old UMP.
The mainstream blocks of the Conservatives and the center-left.
Yeah, so I think those figures are pretty impressive. Look at France's case, it's like 25% or 23% for Rassemblement National. So I think
the colors are kind of similar, right? Because in France, you'd have on this graph Marine Le Pen's party polling just slightly ahead of Emmanuel Macron's La République En Marche.
Yeah,
which
I think
second.
the situation is clearly worse.
Which is
in the UK in terms of what I want to favor regarding the European Union and things like that. But I'm not an expert, but clearly I think the Brexit, more generally speaking, was a terrible mistake. I go to London, every few weeks to do some stuff, and when I talk to different people, that's really the feeling I have, even regarding the people that were in favor of the Brexit in the first place. So I think that's
some of them have changed their minds, is what you're saying.
Yeah, probably. I'm not sure, but yeah, probably. And I think the same thing will happen in France if people go in this direction for Rassemblement National, which will at some day come to some kind of Brexit, the exact same situation. So yeah, I'm pretty depressed seeing those figures, but that's pretty clear. Yeah, that's pretty clear. And I think that's a European movement. That's not something which is related to the UK situation
All right,
precisely.
So you're depressed, but I'll bet Louisa Porritt's not depressed when she sees those numbers, because 19% for the Lib Dems.
Probably.
You're out of the political wilderness. Because explain for our viewers here, it's kind of in the past been a
Yes.
2.5 party system, right? With the Liberal Democrats acting as sort of the arbitrators between the Conservatives and the Labour Party. At this point in time, do you see yourself as a mainstream party or an insurgent party?
I think we're mainstream. I mean, we had the best local election results of any UK political party a few weeks ago. We gained more than 700 local councillors. So I think that shows we are very much back on the map.
So
And the
you're
polls
mainstream.
since
That's
then
interesting
have
because just on that point, Emmanuel Macron's La République En Marche, which has similar political views to yours, he doesn't brand himself as mainstream. He brands himself more as an insurgent. I mean, that's what he says.
And he wanted a revolution,
Sure.
remember?
But you're not saying that.
Well, I think if you think that insurgent is wanting us to remain in the European Union and to have a people's vote on the Brexit deal, then yes, we are. We're the radical party. But actually, that's because we're just the sensible option right now. And we think that the country will be with us on that because you were talking earlier about what the mood in the country is on Brexit. And actually, at the moment, the polls are showing that we are a Remain country now. Remain consistently is getting a 10% majority over Leave. But of course, we have to test that and make sure the deal is put to the people.
All right, let's go to Belfast. The Skype gods tried to keep away Graham Gudgeon, Chief Economic Advisor at the Policy Exchange, honorary professor at Cambridge, but they failed, and he's with us. Thank you so much for being with us here in the France 24 debate. What is your reaction when you see the last poll numbers ahead of Thursday's vote?
I haven't seen poll numbers today. I mean, the last poll numbers I saw were the Brexit Party on about 37% and the Conservative Party down to about 8%, I think, something of that sort. And I just heard you say the Lib Dems on 19%. So clearly what's happening is there's a great deal of satisfaction with the two main parties, Conservative and Labour. And the Leavers are moving towards the Brexit Party, which is clearly going to come out as the biggest single party in this election. And the Remainers are moving away mainly from the Labour Party to the Lib Dems. So in both cases, it may be a sort of protest vote, but it certainly indicates to me just how solid and consistent the pro-Brexit vote is. There's a very passionate and strong pro-Brexit vote in the UK. I mean, I put the balance in general close to 50-50. It's very hard to know what would happen in a straight referendum now. But this is a country divided down the middle. But Brexit is.
So you're saying the lines have barely budged in 3 years, is what you're saying?
Something like that. Yes, I think that's true.
And as a result, when you look at these numbers, very little is what you're saying. So do these EU elections matter, Graham Gudgeon? Are they just a kind of a snap popularity contest, or can they move the conversation?
Well, the first thing to say is this is a weird election. This is an election to a body we're trying to leave, to elect MEPs who our Prime Minister says she hopes will never take up their seats. So turnout is going to be quite an issue here. I mean, a lot of people will say, what a waste of time. You know, we're not going to bother to vote in this. But others will vote, and I think those people will regard it as a kind of second referendum. The Leavers will want to show their support, and similarly, passionate Remainers will want to show their support. So it's a kind of referendum. I think it will have an effect, and the most immediate effect, I think, will be on the Conservatives and on the position of Theresa May. I mean, if the Conservatives come out in single figures, then I think Theresa May will be gone within a week, within a fortnight, and the Conservative Party will then end up with a pro-Brexit leader. And I think the whole tone of the debate will then start to change.
It'll change for the better? Because right now it's pretty vitriolic.
Well, Well, it'll still be vitriolic. This is a very divided country on a major and controversial issue. But it'll be a change for the better from my point of view. I mean, I'm pro-Brexit, and I think a lot of argument has been suppressed. A lot of what we get in the press is what people tend to call Project Fear. A lot of sort of scary figures and projections are thrown out, very few of which I believe. And I think if we had a pro-Brexit prime minister, then that will change. We'll get a much more balanced.
All right, just quickly before we go to the break,
than we have over the last 2 years.
Before we go to the break, Antoine, you heard both Louisa Porritt and Tom Connan say they feel as though sentiment has moved slightly towards the Remain camp. You heard Graham Gudgeon say the fault lines haven't budged at all. What is your feeling?
Well, polls do suggest there might be a slight majority for Remain now, but we know that was what the polls were saying back in 2016, and they turned out to be wrong. And I also remember some months back when this was put to Nigel Farage, and he was I think it was on Channel 4, and a journalist told him, well, you don't represent the people anymore because there's a small majority in favour of remaining. And he said, yes, but even if that's true, that's the position now. If there's a second referendum, we'd have a campaign, and that campaign could change everything. So I think it's still very uncertain, and even a small majority.
What to make of the prospect of those elections on Thursday and what happens afterwards? Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're on the eve of EU elections that weren't supposed to happen in the UK. And yet here they are. The Brexit deal is not done, and the Prime Minister is under pressure from her own camp to step down. We're talking about it with a candidate in those EU elections, Louisa Porritt, who is a London City Councillor in Camden. Also joining us, Adrian Rod, Senior Lecturer in British and Commonwealth Studies at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Commentator and novelist Tom Connan is with us as well. So is Graham Gudgeon, Chief Economic Advisor at the Policy Exchange, who joins us from Belfast. And caught in transit is David Coburn, who's a member of the European Parliament for Nigel Farage's Brexit party. Now, the prospect of prolonged Brexit agony is triggering shudders from the candidate in this country that's leading Emmanuel Macron's party in EU elections. Tom Connan, is that how French people feel, that they're in a hurry for the British to make up their minds, go either stay or leave, but just tell us quickly?
I think she's probably right. But what I want to say is like the EU vote, for this week is really super important. It will be a strong signal for, maybe 20 or 30 years, Do the European citizens understand how it is important for the people to be united? Is it important for the European citizens to understand all those, burning issues like climate change, immigration, and things like that, that are obviously most easy to deal with if we are all united. That's why I'm.
So is Loiseau's exasperation the fact that we've had all these EU summits now that have been monopolized not by the issues that you mentioned, but by Brexit?
Yeah, maybe. But the problem is with people like Mrs. Loiseau, and I think the same thing's happening in other countries in Europe, is the fact that there is no clear party which is in favor of a federation, a clear federation. You have people that are in favor of the Brexit, we just saw that before, in favor of the Frexit, even if Marine Le Pen now changed her mind. You still have someone called Florian Philippot and other people that are in favor of the Frexit. But there is I see no people
who are in favor of a lot more Europe.
Of more Europe, of a clear, movement towards that direction. I think that's the only option now, or whether we go for the Brexit or a federation, a real federation.
It's either a lot less or a lot more Europe.
Well, no, not necessarily, but I think it is true that it's telling of the current political climate that even pro-Europeans feel it would be political suicide to advocate a greater level of political integration. And of course, the reason they feel it would be political suicide is because, in France at least, there's no strong public appetite for an actual federation, just as there's no strong public appetite for Frexit. I mean,
but don't you think the fact that the current EU structure is hybrid, is vague for most people, and I think it's really vague. We don't know what it is, you know. So I think that's a big problem for the people. So maybe that could be a political suicide, but maybe that suicide should be necessary for the years to come. So, not for tomorrow, but for the 20 years to come.
So, Louisa Porte, the criticism that's been leveled at the UK since the 1980s is that Britain always acts like it's got one foot in and one foot out. Do you feel as though if, as you wish, Britain stays in the European Union, it'll be all in this time?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that we have been a bit of a reluctant member historically. And we are still in a very privileged position as EU members because we have various opt-outs. We're not in Schengen, we're not in the Euro, and all those positions are kind of specific advantages that Britain has. So that's why we say there isn't a deal that's better than the one that we have already. But I think if the country does show that it's changed its mind, if we get a chance to have that referendum, which we should, then we have to hopefully show our commitment to Europe this time. And I think this kind of federalists versus those who believe in sovereignty debate is a false one, because actually you can still be a sovereign country and have shared sovereignty at the same time. And what we're seeing from the effects of Brexit is actually we'd be giving up a lot of our sovereignty because we would be a rule taker, not a rule maker. And I think now that the British people are starting to see the real possible effects of Brexit, particularly economically, we can see that already from all the uncertainty. I hope that we would be a more committed and constructive member. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't also provide scrutiny through the European Parliament, as any legislative body needs. But we also need to, work with our fellow European partners and tackle those big challenges that were mentioned earlier together, particularly climate change.
So, Graham Gudgeon, you agree that it's either all in or all out?
Yes, I think so. The actual withdrawal agreement that's on the table at present that's been negotiated is not any sort of compromise. It's the silliest of positions, really, whereby we stay very close to the EU customs union and single market, but have no say in future regulations on either. Very hard to imagine why any country would have signed up to that, and we're now busy getting rid of the Prime Minister who agreed this with Brussels. So yes, I do agree. It's either in or out, and for me, it's out. It's just a clean break. Let's get out, and then let's live with the European Union, as closely and in as much harmony as we possibly can in future. Joining in several of the things, the R&D collaboration or student exchanges, all sorts of things which are sensible. But we would be a third country, negotiating those sort of friendly collaborations.
All right, I believe we can now cross to David Coburn, who joins us by telephone, who's in transit. David Coburn, thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.
Yes, pleasure. Sorry, I'm not in situ. I'm afraid I'm traveling at the moment. But yes, it's very interesting. As far as I'm concerned, the British people want to leave the European Union. And that has been made ever so clear to the Prime Minister. She has behaved appallingly. and we are going to be getting rid of him fairly shortly. But we're going to have a massive victory for Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party in the forthcoming elections, which is going to be stunning. We're going to see the biggest election victory in history, I think.
37%, more than a third of the vote, according to that last poll we were talking about. Now, the Eurosceptics, like yourself, bemoan supranationalist entities. I want your view on something that happened last Saturday in Milan. A rally, which, if it had been of the left, what I guess would have been called an internationale, representatives of 11 countries, including France's Marine Le Pen. It would have been 12 countries, but Austria's Vice Chancellor, Heinz Christian Strache, suddenly found himself embroiled in scandal. The German press publishing a video shot in Ibiza where he plots how to take illicit Russian money with a woman posing as a Kremlin insider. First of all, your thoughts on that Milan meeting of like-minded Eurosceptics. Is that something that you identify with?
No, we're separate from that sort of thing. But I can see that in Europe, people are fed up to the back teeth, as are the British, and they want to make their own decisions about their affairs.
So where should just to be clear on this, where should the Brexit Party sit in the next European Parliament? In which group?
Hello?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry, yeah. They want to make their own decisions in their own sovereign parliament.
So they won't sit. They won't sit with any other political group inside the European Parliament.
I can tell you now, I'm absolutely convinced that.
Oh dear! We seem to be losing the connection there with David Coburn. Hopefully, we'll have it. It'll be third time lucky there. Louisa Porritt, your thoughts on the makeup of the next European Parliament?
Well, you heard it there. David Coburn couldn't even say where his party will be sitting in the parliament. I mean, this party is one that hasn't even presented a manifesto for these elections. And he himself hasn't been attending committees and voting in them. So it's a bit of a joke, really. But anyway, our party would be sitting in the wider Oldie group, which has 68 MEPs already. So it's quite a large grouping in the European Parliament. And we think that Liberal parties are set to do quite well across Europe, as well as our own. You mentioned earlier, we are polling second nationally at the moment. And in London in particular, we're expected to do well. So we could see quite a different makeup of the Parliament, and inevitably there will be some more Eurosceptics elected, but I think we'll also see that counteracted with pro-European MEPs elected from across Europe as well, particularly in France.
Speaking of France, Adrian Rod, it was about a year and a half ago, Emmanuel Macron in September of 2017 gives this big speech at the Sorbonne about Europe. And already he was trying to pit it, a lot for domestic reasons, as a battle between himself and his movement and the far right, and sort of leaving everyone else out of the conversation. Is that the conversation between federalists? Has he succeeded in making it about federalists like himself versus the specter of those who want to undo the European project?
Well, it looks as if those are the two parties, La République En Marche and the ex-National Front under the Rassemblement National. It looks as if they're polling ahead. And you drew a comparison with the figures that we have from Britain, which are indeed very, very interesting. You have the parties that have taken a very clear position, the Brexit Party that's polling ahead, and the Liberal Democrats that are traditionally the strongly pro-European party and that are clearly draining votes from Labour for that reason. But as you said, also, Emmanuel Macron was saying that for domestic political reasons, and the reality of the political spectrum of the political makeup is much more complex than that. Yeah. There are still a diversity of views expressed by a diversity of parties.
I totally agree with that. And clearly, Macron was right, was partially right when he said what you just told before. Yes, you have the federalists versus the sovereignists, and Macron wants to be, the unique, person for the first camp. But what I see and what is clearly obvious in France, I think the same thing is happening in the UK, but I will stick to France. There is another division. The new divide is not only federalists versus sovereignists, but there's also a left-wing version of each camp and a right-wing version of each camp. You have 4 camps as a whole, and you have Mélenchon for the left-wing version of the sovereignist camp, and you have exactly the same thing for the other 3. So I think that's how we should understand how it's happening now.
Graham Goodgen, it's not just the UK, right? It's Spain, it's Germany, it's Italy, it's France. A splintering of the political offer, if you will, that voters can choose from. Why is that?
Well, I think there's a deep discontent, obviously, in many parts of Europe, of the EU. Things haven't been going well. The formation of the euro, I think, was a mistake. It was a step too far, too early, and it's caused a great deal of harm, particularly in southern Europe, where a lot of the discontent is. And the migration issue, of course, has caused discontent in Eastern Europe. I mean, I think there's a lot of support now for a looser Europe. I mean, just the opposite of what President Macron seems to want. If we could have a looser arrangement, a collaboration between sovereign states, I think the UK would probably be quite happy to sign up to that and keep with it. And we know that several of the Eastern European states are in favour of that, and perhaps Italy as well.
But we're talking the same week. So Graham, on this point, you're an economist. You're an economist. We're talking the same week that we're seeing this build-up in tension between the United States and China over technology, over Huawei, and the EU is kind of stuck in the middle. The EU, not the institutions, but just the continent itself and its citizens. Isn't there an argument for the Europeans banding together?
Yes, I think there is. I mean, that's one of the stronger arguments, I think, for the European Union. But at present, there are opponents and difficulties on all sides. I mean, President Trump is about to turn its attention on the EU, and is threatening to put 25% tariffs on cars produced in the EU. At the same time as the EU is going very slow, or almost refusing to negotiate a free trade agreement with the UK, so that European cars may face a 10% tariff into the UK at the same time. I mean, we really should sort all this out in a friendly way. But many of us in the UK think that the negotiations with the EU, the Brexit negotiations, have just been conducted from the Brussels side, in the most unfriendly and unhelpful way. And if it was more friendly, if we had a free trade agreement now with between the UK and the EU, perhaps we could be helpful with the US as well, and act as an intermediary with
Louisa Porte, do you agree?
But at present, there are just trade difficulties on all.
Louisa Porte, do you agree?
Do I agree with the
which
fact
aspect? That Brussels has been unfriendly in the Brexit negotiations, and that if the EU showed a little more leniency, that London would be a little bit more loyal in the trade dispute between the superpowers, China and the US?
Well, I think that Brussels is probably as fed up of Brexit as we are here in the UK, and this has been going on for 3 years already. So naturally, as a result of these tense negotiations going on, I think you would see some tension there, and for the relationship to be a less cooperative one. We've got a government that's trying to take us out of the EU. So, of course, we're not working as well with our European partners as we should be. And this is, as was said before, this is another key reason why we need to stay in the EU, actually, because the EU is an important bulwark to those other superpowers, and it's only by being part of a bigger bloc can we actually have an important and constructive role in the balance of power when it comes to trade.
Louisa, one final question for you, because the BBC is reporting that there's a problem with Thursday's vote, and it's near and dear to many of our viewers, which is late postal ballots. Is this something that's been drawn to your attention?
Well, I was aware that certainly in some boroughs of London, there'd been quite a low number of postal vote ballots sent back already to local councils of those that had been issued. So it doesn't surprise me that some of those have come in late. I mean, there have been all sorts of issues with this election because we weren't expecting to have them. Obviously, my party, the Liberal Democrats, is delighted that they're going ahead. But the local authorities that are having to run these elections in each borough haven't been prepared for it. So all sorts of adjustments have had to be made, including changes of polling stations. And also there's been a big problem with registering EU citizens in this country who are entitled to vote, but the Cabinet Office put an instruction to local councils that unless EU citizens opted in by filling in an additional form, that they would not automatically be on the register, and they had to go through that extra step, which was quite a bureaucratic hurdle, by the 7th of May.
All right, we'll see then how many people do turn out. Turnout again will be one of the keys. Louisa Port, I want to thank you so much for joining us from London. I want to thank Graham Gudgeon for being with us from Belfast, Adrian Rod, Tom Connan. Apologies for David Coburn with those transmission issues getting through. Hopefully we'll be able to debrief once the results have been counted on Sunday night, along with the 27 other members of the European Union. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to Erin Agunke. Yeah, we've been looking at that last poll from YouGov. 37% for the Brexit Party.
Yeah, between 36 and 37%. Brexit Party is doing well, it looks like. So that's just a graph that takes a look at... I don't know if we can see it up there. Oh, there it is.
Move the mic. Big microphone.
So there's a graph, showing all of the how all the different parties are polling. Now, it's interesting to take a look at some reactions to why the Brexit Party is doing so well. We have this Twitter user here, Lewis Goodall, who explains in a thread, if it works, that essentially the Brexit Party has done a really good job at using social media. They've been very active on the platform, posting regularly, an all-out kind of social media campaign, especially on Twitter, that has been really attractive to people. I thought it was interesting to note that some outlets, starting with BuzzFeed Media a couple of weeks ago, and it was there's their Twitter page there, which the Mirror talked about again tonight, is that apparently their Twitter feed is polluted with bots. So this Mirror article is saying that 8 of the top 10 Brexit Party promoting Twitter accounts appear to be bots. Now, the way that they kind of decide how likely it is that someone is a bot or not is how many followers the different Brexit Party supporters have, how quickly they gather followers. So along with BuzzFeed, they've decided that a lot of that popularity on social media may be
really bots. Because the social media giants had said that they'd learned some of the mistakes from 2016.
Yeah, well.
Well, the tone of the campaign, we heard our panel say it's vitriolic and it's going to remain vitriolic.
Yes, it has gotten ugly. So it started with milkshaking, or actually, I guess I'll talk about this first. So here is a British actor retweeting a video that has gone viral on social media about a pro-Brexit MP, David Davies, who is being kind of verbally assaulted by a pro-Brexit British voter. So his commentary is nothing to see here, just a Brexiteer MP with a wearable camera for protection filming a Brexit supporter with wearable microphone for calling people traitors, liars, and snowflakes while filming them. This country has lost its mind. So essentially, I don't know if we can get sound on this video or not, but she kind of lambasts him for voting for Theresa May's Brexit deal. And she decides that that makes him a traitor towards, I guess, the Brexit cause. So, and he actually ended this exchange with saying that people like her make him almost wish he voted to remain in the European Union.
Right.
So things getting ugly. In addition, we had a Guardian columnist here who was kind of asked to leave a Brexit rally in Kensington by police, who apparently had said to him, for fear of his safety and that of his team, they begged us to leave. What a time to be alive. So kind of images that are reminiscent of what we've seen at Trump rallies in the United States.
Tom Connan, you know, the British, it's supposed to be the land of moderation. Are you surprised by this?
Yeah, I'm really surprised. I'm really shocked, clearly. And I think
it's in France where it gets feisty, not in the UK.
Yeah, but what's, a big concern for me also is the fact that, the young generation will not go vote. I think for most of them, and that's a big concern. I think we really need to build some kind of new desire, some new European desire. I think it can sound cheesy, but I really mean it, because if there is no new desire for, again, the 10 or 20 years to come, we will see that, again, in other countries in Europe, in France. So I think
that's get out the vote is your message.
Yeah, we really need to say that.
Erna Gunke, many thanks. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.